I was born to the canopy, raised in the breath of green leaves and the sigh of the wind through endless boughs. Kelathin is home, and yet it is not. They say the gods whisper to us in our dreams, but for me the dreams are not of Tunair's light, or the endless peace. They are of shadowed trails and half-heard calls from the deep forest, of creatures that move not with cruelty but with purpose, alien and unyielding. I was trained to revere balance. The druids teach that every predator serves the bloom. The rangers show how death feeds life. The shamans, those rare few among our kind, listen to the breath of the world spirit and accept its indifference. And me, I stand somewhere in between. I've learned the rituals, I've chanted the names, but when I close my eyes, the wild does not comfort me. It calls to me. I do not know if I answer this call from courage or from fear. The greater Faydark is not what songs make it. Poets tell of a realm dappled in green gold light and ancient trees that cradle you like a mother's arms. But they do not mention the silence that falls when a predator watches from beyond the leaves. They do not tell you how a single misstep from a treetop bridge is death, not from the fall, but from what waits below. There are creatures here, twisted by something they do not understand. Poison wasps the size of a grown man's body. Fairies or the Fae, sentient in ways that make little sense. And the orcs, Crushbone, filth who test the forest like a festering wound, pushing and growing bolder. But the most dangerous thing is not the orcs or the beasts. It is the lie that this forest is safe because it is ours, because it is not. It was never meant to belong to us. We walk a pact made by older voices than our own. We are tolerated, until a day comes when we are not. I looked an orc in the eyes today. There was fear there, yes, but not ignorance. He knew why I had come, as if we held a mutual agreement that one of us would die this day. An unwritten contract of good versus evil. Or perhaps it is evil versus evil or good versus good. I can't quite tell. But my arrow struck first. I live and he does not. That is the simple and final truth of it. The forest consumes all the same. The ranger's bow speaks for the forest. The druid's flame clears the rot. And the shaman speaks to the beast. Not to save it, but to understand it. But where does mercy live in this? When I loosed the arrow, was I defender or was I murderer? We claim that the orcs are savages, that they do not know balance. But I have seen how they live. Brutal, yes, but not without structure, not without loyalty. Is the difference between the savage and the civilized simply who writes the story? Or is there fine print that cannot be seen by us lowly mortals? I wonder if Tunair watches. What does she see? Does she bless my hand when I strike? Or does she mourn each death? Even when necessary? Does she even care? Does she notice a single leaf amongst the trees? I cannot know, but I try to listen, and the silence is heavy. I can feel it now, a weight in my chest that grows heavier with every life I take. The forest does not judge, but I do. How can I not? The orc who enslaves, the snake upon the child's path, the wandering skeleton who clings to a memory without direction, haunting the glades without purpose or malice. They simply are, as am I. They call me many things, druid, ranger, shaman, all titles, all roles, but the truth, I do not know who I am. The elders say we serve balance, but what if balance is not peace? What if it is struggle eternal and raw? I try to hear the forest speak, not in words, not even in feelings, but in shifts of the wind and glimpses of movement. It is not beckoning me. It is testing me. But to what end? I do not know where this path leads, only that it begins with me, and it ends somewhere deep, somewhere dark and true. Tonight I lit a small fire away from the city against the warnings of the sentries. I placed crushed lavender in the flame and whispered the prayers I half remember, not for safety or strength, but for clarity. The flames danced, and in their smoke I saw not visions, but questions. Who do I protect? Who do I serve? And what does it mean to be part of the forest and not just a passerby? Tuner, if you hear me, I do not ask for your light. I ask for your silence to end. If I must wander, let it be not in circles. If I must fight, let it be with purpose. The world wakes, and I can feel it in the roots and the bones of this land. And I must be ready. I try to listen, but again the silence is too heavy. The forest is full of paths. Most of them are hidden, some are walked by beasts, others by spirits or memories of orders long since forgotten. And now, by me. I am not yet worthy of the name Protector, but I am listening, watching, and trying to learn. The greater Faydark is dangerous, but it is not evil, not cruel. It simply is. An indifferent entity that does not adhere to the rules of elf or orc. It continues, it teaches, and it tests those who would call it home. And I think it is where I belong. Perhaps this thought is more of a feeling than anything substantial. A calling, a sign, and a subtle urge. It is hard to explain, but it feels right. I try to listen again, but there is nothing. I spent this day not in meditation nor in study, but in pursuit. The orcs are spreading. Their scouts no longer hide, they move with purpose now, no longer creeping through the undergrowth, but walking boldly into the heart of our domain, as if they have forgotten fear, or possibly worse, remembered something we have yet to learn. I watched one from the shadows of a mossy stump. He stood still beneath a crooked tree, sniffing the air, axe slung low, eyes scanning the forest not with caution, but with confidence. His face was worn, scarred by years of survival. I could see no hate in him, no madness, only hunger, not of body, but of conquest. When I let my arrow fly, I did not feel triumph. I simply was, and he was no more. There was a time not long ago when I believed that defending the forest would feel righteous, that when the time came I would strike swiftly and without hesitation, a servant of Tuner, a blade of balance, but the truth is colder. His body fell into the underbrush with a sound softer than I had expected. No scream, no call, only a hush of leaves welcoming one more soul to the dirt. The forest does not know pity. I knelt beside him, but not to plunder, to look, to see. He was younger than I thought, a pawn by rank. The scars were fresh, his fingers calloused, not from war, but from work. No more free than I from the harsh reality that one day I too would serve as food for the roots. And that's when the question came again. What is the line between a hunter and a killer? The shamans say that death is not an end, but a passage. The druids say it is the return, and the rangers, they do not speak of it at all. But I feel it. Every time I press my palm to the forest floor after a life ends, I feel the tremble of something deeper. Not sorrow, not celebration. Continuance. Perhaps that is what balance truly is. Not in fairness, not in morality, but in motion. A circle that consumes and renews, without judgment, without pause. The tree falls and feeds the roots of others. The wolf kills and her pups survive. The orc dies, and in his absence a hawk returns to a nest where he once trod, and an army of insects feast on the carrion. So where do I stand in this endless equation? Am I a hand of balance or disruption, a necessary act or an arrogant intervention? I do not hate the orcs. That is a dangerous thing to admit, even to myself. They burn our trees and they slaughter my kin. They call us vermin. They call us trespassers. But hatred clouds the vision that I'm struggling to see. When I watch them, I see more than beast. I see ritual. I see language, loyalty, even a kind of faith, though not in any god that I know of. They are not without culture, not without reason. And I think that makes them more dangerous, because they are not simply surviving, they are choosing. And perhaps just as I feel the pull of the deep wilderness, they feel the same towards conquest, towards domination, as if some old voice in their blood commands it. Who am I to silence it? And yet I do. I silence it with arrows, with frost, with flame, and with a sharp whisper of a spell that coils from my lips before I even think of mercy. Today I felled 3 more. Scouts again, moving in small patterns near the edge of the glade, testing, probing. Each time I circled behind them, following broken ferns and faint footprints, listening to the crows to know where they waited. I tell myself it is protection, that if I do not act, they will overrun our lands. They will poison the springs, fell the oldest trees for firewood. But is that certainty, or fear disguised as duty? And yet I kill them all the same. I returned to the Druid circle afterwards. They had not noticed my absence, or if they had, they said nothing. One of the elders was meditating within the warmth of our treetop sanctuary. I approached, hoping for wisdom, hoping perhaps that he would look at me and see the questions in my soul and offer answers. He said only this: "The hawk does not mourn the mouse, Atreides, nor does the tree mourn the leaf." Then he closed his eyes again. I do not know if he meant to soothe me or to warn me. There is a darkness in Greater Faydark, but it is not evil. It is the darkness of deep roots, of old soil, of secrets too ancient for words. The orcs may be invaders, but the forest is not theirs to conquer, nor mine to protect. I realize now that I am not its guardian, I am its guest, one of many. And guests, I think, must learn humility or be reminded of it. I think often of the wolf, a creature both revered and feared by many. When it hunts, it does not question the righteousness of the act. When it is hunted, it does not curse the spear. It lives, it dies, and the forest remembers both. Am I less than the wolf for my doubts? Or does that make me more? Perhaps it is not answers I seek. Perhaps it is the strength to live in the asking. To walk the path without certainty, but with reverence. To kill when I must, but never without understanding what I have ended. The night is rising now, and the trees sway in a rhythm to some song I cannot hear. I sit near a fern ring where fireflies gather. The light is soft and fleeting, like all things. Tomorrow I will track deeper, where the whispers of a camp forming near the edge of Crushbone territory. Scouts growing into skirmishers. But tonight I rest, I reflect, and try to forgive myself. And I pray, not to Tuner for strength or guidance, but that when the moment comes again, I will know the difference between balance and vengeance, between justice and instinct, between the arrow that serves and the one that merely ends. I am beginning to understand them. Not just their movements or their camps, but something beneath. A rhythm, a pattern, a hum in their bones. The orcs of Crushbone do not roam aimlessly. They expand like roots or like mold or perhaps fire. And each time I loose an arrow, each time a spell crackles from my fingertips, something in me wonders if I have killed a beast or simply a reflection. All my life I was told they are monsters, that their minds are dulled by rage, their souls too twisted for compassion. They destroy for the joy of it. They war because they know no other way. That's what the elders say, what our warriors believe. And there is truth in that, yes. I've seen their cruelty. I've walked the aftermath of their raids, gnarled branches blackened by fire, the bones of forest creatures crackled open like kindling. I've felt their axes tear past me, heard their guttural war cries echo through the trees like something primal and vile. But still, when I move quietly through the underbrush and watch from the shadows of fallen logs and high boughs, I see something else. They have structure, not just brute hierarchy, but culture. There are elders among them, wiser, slower orcs with bones painted of ochre and ash, surrounded by younger warriors who defer without question. They burn herbs before battle, chant in rough syllables I can't decipher, dance in the hours before dawn. It is not chaos, it is ceremony, and I cannot help but see a parallel. We wood elves revere the seasons, we sing to the trees, we paint our faces before rites of adulthood. What separates us? A god, a language, a belief, or simply the victor's permission to name the savage? I am not a traitor. I know what they would do if they caught me. I've seen it too. One of our rangers was strung up by his ankles, throat cut wide. They used his bones for drums. That kind of brutality is not legend. It is a memory, and it is real. But I also know this. Hatred is easy when you do not watch, when you strike from afar, when death is a flicker at the edge of your vision, not the truth you kneel beside. I used to think that the forest despised them, that it resisted their presence. But lately, I wonder. The vines still grow over their camps. The trees still breathe the same air. The ground does not open to swallow them. So maybe the forest does not take sides. Maybe it simply receives. Every orc I've killed has died in silence, because I can't remember their last sound. Or perhaps like some nightmare I wish to forget. It evades scrutiny. But not from a lack of effort. I do not mean that. I mean silence inside of me. No cheer, no rage, just the wind. A brief tremor of heat from my hand, the creak of my bowstring, and the moment after, where the forest absorbs the act like it always does. And I sit beside the body, not in triumph, not in grief, but in question. Why them? Why me? Why does the forest let us both breathe, only to allow one to end the other? If nature teaches anything, is it not balance? And yet what balance is there in war? The camp I raided today was smaller than most. 3 warriors, a fire, and what looked like a crude altar. Carvings surrounded its spiked shapes, fangs, crude painted symbols. They bowed before it, chanting in rhythm, then took up arms and marched. And for a moment I watched them and thought, this is no different than the ceremonies I have participated in myself. When we honored Tuner with prayer and dance, the only difference is the shape and the name, and even that feels thin, like water with a bad taste. It is heresy, I know. If I spoke these thoughts aloud, the druids would excommunicate me, the Rangers Guild would fight me with both word and possibly sword, and the shamans would turn their backs. But the forest hears me, and yet it says nothing. Maybe that is permission, or maybe it is patience. I can't be sure, and that does little to offer comfort. But the forest is not for the complacent. The orcs build not with care, but with desperation. Their huts are lashed together with bone and sinew, reinforced with logs felled crudely and bark stripped in jagged scars. Yet within I've seen murals, paintings of battles long past, of a towering figure crowned in fire, of great beasts they revere or perhaps once tamed in ages past. We call it filth and they call it history. We call it ruin and they call it home. And I begin to wonder if every forest has its invader, or if every tree simply grows where it can. I can feel myself growing stronger, my efforts and desperation to learn bearing fruit, where once when I spoke words of power I could produce smaller magical effects. This too has grown like a well-used muscle. When I channel my magic now, I feel more than energy. I feel weight, responsibility. My spells do not merely wound, they end. This too brings only more questions, and I must ask myself, when does the shaman stop healing only the wounded and begin wounding to prevent the need to heal? That is where I am now, somewhere lost between protector and predator, between servant of balance and arbiter of it. There was a young orc I did not kill. He must have been barely older than a child. Bare chest and no armor, just a crude stone axe and wild eyes. He shuddered and shrank when he saw me, tried to shrink and clutched his eyes shut, gripping his toy axe in fear. I drew my bow. I aimed. And then I walked away. This act was not committed from mercy, but from understanding, because I saw no malice in his eyes, only hunger. And I have known that look. I have felt it in the days I go without food, when the forest turns cold, and even the trees seem to forget your name. If he returns with a blade, will I regret my choice, or will the forest see it as symmetry? I find myself envying the beasts. The wolf hunts because it must, the bear defends because it feels threatened. There is no complexity, no morality, only instinct. But I think, I reflect, I question, and it paralyzes me. I wonder if this is what truly separates us from the wild. Not wisdom, but doubt. And maybe that's why we fail, because the bear never stops to ask if the deer deserves to live. But I ask it every time, and an answer never comes. The priests say we are Tuner's chosen, that we were born of her song made to shepherd the green places, to protect the harmony. But what is harmony if it must be enforced with blood? I see now that nature does not always reward kindness. It rewards persistence. It rewards adaptation. It rewards those who endure, who shape the world rather than plead with it. And in that the orcs are more natural than we. They thrive. They burn and build and make and take without apology. Is that evil, or is it just simply honesty? Maybe I'm not a shepherd, maybe I am not a guardian, maybe I am simply a witness, a soul passing through a world that will outlast me, that will forget me, that does not require my approval to continue. And if that is true, then perhaps the lesson is not in the killing, but in the knowing. Sometimes I wonder if the forest keeps score, if the roots remember who bled upon them, if the trees whisper names to the wind at night, recounting the deeds of those who walked beneath their boughs. Or perhaps they do not care. Perhaps all they remember is the pattern: life, death, silence, and growth. Maybe I should learn from them to feel without judgment, to act without cruelty, to fall without fear. I will kill again, I know this. The orcs will not stop. The camps will grow, the woods will bleed. But I will not forget what I have seen. I will not let victory rot into righteousness. I will walk this path, eyes open, heart heavy, hands steady. And maybe, just maybe, that is what it means to serve the balance. Not to know, but to continue.